Let's get right into it. More than 50% of PhD students consider quitting, and it's not because they aren't smart, it's because they were never taught how to survive the system. You see, a PhD isn't just research. It's pressure, isolation, failed experiments, difficult advisors, and years of uncertainty. In this explainer, I'm going to show you the real survival strategies students use to actually make it through.
That's right, over half. And look, this isn't a sign of weakness. It's a feature of the system. It's a brutal filter, and the ones who make it through aren't always the smartest. They're the most strategic. They're the ones who learn the unwritten rules of the game.
And you really need to hear this right now. Your brain power is just the ticket to get in the door. Survival? Well, that demands a completely different set of tools.
Okay, let's dive into what that battlefield actually looks like. The biggest mistake students make is thinking a PhD is just an extension of school. It is not. It is a multi-year exercise in psychological endurance.
This image just perfectly illustrates the reality of it all. You're constantly juggling research, publishing, conferences, and just trying to manage your time, often with absolutely zero structure. The system is chaotic by design. It's really engineered to see if you can carve a path through all that ambiguity and deliver a finished project.
So let's just shatter some of these misconceptions right now. You think it's pure research, but what it actually is project management. You believe it's a test of intelligence, but really it's a test of endurance. And this is so crucial, you are not writing your magnum opus. You are earning a license to practice research. The goal isn't finding all the answers, it's about learning how to navigate total uncertainty.
This brings us to our very first survival strategy, and it requires a pretty radical reframing of the end goal. So forget the Nobel Prize for a second. We're aiming for something much more practical.
This is the concept of the minimum viable thesis, or the MVT. Your goal here is not perfection, it is completion. You need to define the smallest possible piece of original work that meets the standard for a PhD at your institution, and then you execute on that, relentlessly.
Just let this sink in. Your dissertation is a training exercise. It just proves that you have the skills to conduct independent research. That's it. You've got an entire career ahead of you to produce a masterpiece. Right now, your only job is to graduate.
Perfectionism is the enemy. I'm serious. It is the #1 cause of delays, burnout, and people quitting. The most successful PhDs are the ones who internalize that good enough is, in fact, exactly what you need to get across the finish line.
Okay, our next strategy is all about managing the single most important relationship you will have during your entire PhD.
You just cannot be a passive student waiting for instructions. Your supervisor is busy, they're juggling a dozen other priorities, and honestly, they will forget things. You have to take ownership and manage them like a key stakeholder in your project, not like a boss you should be afraid of.
So here's the playbook. First, you set the agenda for every meeting. Second, and this is completely non-negotiable, you document everything. Send a follow-up email summarizing what was discussed and the next steps. This creates a paper trail that prevents the dreaded moving goalposts, which is the #1 reason a PhD drags on for years. Clarify expectations early, and always be the one to schedule that next meeting.
All right, strategy number 3 is about managing your most valuable resource, your deep work time. This is where the actual thesis gets written.
This is what I call the 80-20 writing protocol. The vast majority of your progress is going to come from a very small, highly focused window of time. Your job is to identify that window, for most people it's a few hours in the morning, and then protect it at all costs. And you have to be absolutely ruthless about this. Protect this time with extreme violence. During your golden hours, you have a non-negotiable appointment with your thesis. That means no email, no social media, no quick checks of anything. This protected time is sacred. It's the difference between finishing and floundering.
And finally, our 4th strategy is all about psychological survival. It's about protecting your identity from being completely consumed by your research.
You have to separate your self-worth from your academic output. A failed experiment is not a personal failure. A paper rejection is not an indictment of your character. Your value as a human is constant, regardless of your research progress.
To do this, you need a sanctuary. This is a part of your life that has absolutely nothing to do with academia. It's a space where you can just exist, without the crushing pressure of being a researcher all the time.
This could be a sports team, an art class, or simply time with friends who work in completely different fields and don't care what a p-value is. And remember, this isn't a distraction. It's a necessary anchor that prevents the total identity collapse that leads so many people to quit. So let's tie all of this together. Surviving a PhD is not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about having the right strategies, a playbook for a very specific and challenging game.
So remember the playbook. Aim for a minimum viable thesis, not a masterpiece. Manage your supervisor proactively, like a project manager. Protect your golden hours for deep work, and build a sanctuary to insulate your identity.
These are the unwritten rules. They're about working smarter, not just harder, and playing the long game. So I'll leave you with this question. When you reframe yourself not as a student, but as a researcher managing a long-term project filled with uncertainty, what is your #1 survival tip?